Last year, there were so many behavior issues, disruptions. It was crazy. Can it be any better next year? The answer is yes, and we're going to talk about how. Well, welcome back to the Teach for the Heart podcast, where we tackle teaching challenges from a biblical perspective. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. I'm here today with Jen Fry, one of our Teach for the Heart Plus team members. Jen, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, so glad to be here, Linda.
So today, we want to talk to those of you who had a really rough year last year, particularly if it was really rough when it came to student behaviors, classroom management. There were maybe too many disruptions, too much chaos, too many behavior issues that you didn't know what to do with. And you might be wondering, can next year be any better? And if so, how? And I think this is a really, really important thing to talk about as we dive in. Jen, have you known any teachers who kind of were in that situation?
Myself. Honestly, what was shocking for me was it wasn't my first year that was the roughest year. It was 3 or 4 years in when I went, oh my gosh, I tried new things this year and it totally started the year off wrong. And I paid for it the whole year. So something's got to be different this next year, and just that feeling but it really set me off balance because I thought, oh, I've done this. Like I have this down. And then one year or one group of students or a change in curriculum can really set you off and feel like you're just on rough footing.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's so true. And for me, my biggest difference was between first and second. But I think you said something really powerful there. You said, I did some things in the beginning, and so I got off to a bad start. Like the start of the year is such a sometimes I call it like a magical time, but it can also be like an awful time, right? Because if you start off right and you get off on that good foot and you get structures in place and you got your relationships going, it can make the rest of the year so much easier. Not that there's no issues, but it's just much more manageable. But if you get off on the wrong foot or something you're doing, sets the wrong tone, you're fighting against that all year. So that's what we want to talk about now, really, is how do you get your mind ready so that you can set the tone right so that then things can go so much more smoothly.
Yeah. And I think it's just so important to, kind of the first part that we were going to talk about was believing that it's possible because luckily for me, I had this example of like, well, it did go well in other years. And so I could say, okay, this was a bad year. I know what I don't want to do. Now next year I can start back on. So that made it a little bit easier. But, you know, that's not always the case. And so what are some other ways that we just need to maybe tweak or change our mindset because maybe we don't believe it's possible?
Yeah. And this really is our number one thing. We're about to give you a list of things, and this is number one. You do have to believe it's possible, right? Because if you don't think things can change, you're not gonna make the changes needed to change them, right? You're just kind of gonna be stuck in a stuck mindset and nothing much. Even if you make some changes, it's just not gonna work. But Jen, you asked a really good question. You said, well, what if I don't believe things can change, right? So I
Mhm.
think a couple things just off the top of my mind that can be helpful, and I'm curious what you would add. I think, first of all, talking to people and asking their experience. Sometimes we feel like I'm the only one that dealt with this, or I just don't know what I'm doing, or maybe I don't have the personality it takes to be a teacher. And you are not the only one asking those things. Oh my goodness. If nothing else, hop in our Facebook group, teachfortheheart.com/Facebook. Ask your question, and you will have hundreds of teachers saying, yes, me too. I've been there. We work with teachers all the time in our classroom management programs, and these are very common things. But hearing someone else's story, oh yeah, I was in the same spot. I made these changes. Things are so much better. That can really help build your confidence. And then number two, I think, is just learning a little bit about, well, what are the differences? And we're going to get into some of them here. We also, if you listen to this and think I need more, we have a free training called teachfortheheart.com/free, where we basically explain why are things not good and what's going to make the difference, and kind of hearing that and realizing, oh yeah, I was doing that. Oh, okay, that can kind of also help you realize that it is worth it and there is hope. Jen, would you add anything to that?
I would just from personal experience, I remember just in a very intimate time with God, he was asking me to do something. This wasn't even a classroom thing, but I think it applies here. That he was asking me to do something and step out, which is what we're doing when we're signing a contract for the next year. But I had all these excuses in my head about why it wouldn't work, why I wasn't the right person for it, why he should just ask somebody else. And God basically just I felt the Holy Spirit say, like, "Do you trust me to handle those things? Like, can I carry that load? How big of a God do you believe I am?" And I was like, "Okay, I guess," a little bit like Moses, like, "I guess I have to do this." But, like, in the end, I was the barrier to believing it was possible. It wasn't the actual situations, but I had to really address those, and I think as believers, we can get in our own way a lot. And so when if you're doing what Linda's asking or saying about asking other people and seeing what their experiences are, make sure you're asking believing teachers because they're going to have a perspective that is going to match ours. And they're also going to be sharing from the standpoint of this, we also serve a God who can handle our big issues and our frustrations, and nothing is a surprise to him. So I think really making sure who are you asking the advice from, and then taking it with a grain of salt too, because your situation is different than theirs.
Yeah. Yeah, but you bring up such a good point, right? Praying about it. Because, if you're teaching, God has called you to this, right? God has put you in this position. He's put you in the classroom. You're I'm assuming you're signed up for another year at this point. And so if he's called you, he's going to equip you, right? And so just kind of just wrestling with that with God, bringing your fears to him. So this is how I fear. I'm afraid. I don't know if this can be better. But then, like you said, believing him, like, no, okay, all right, you can help me. You can guide me to solutions. You can give me the wisdom I need. You can give me the strength and the courage and whatever it is you feel is lacking. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy, right? God's paths are not always easy, but He will give us that courage and wisdom to be able to handle it well.
Yeah, and sometimes we need a little reminder for ourselves. So at the New Year's Day, we're very big on like pick a word for the year, but maybe, for next school year or to make this to remind yourself of this is to pick a Bible verse and spend the summer memorizing it so that then when times are hard, you can remind yourself of the truths that he said in those hard times to keep yourself going.
Yeah, that's so good. So, number one, believe it is possible. And if you don't, spend some time thinking and meditating on that. Number two, have a classroom management plan. Okay, this is huge. And I'll share my personal story. I didn't share much, but about my turnaround. But my bad year was my first year, and I remember actually my college professor saying, you need to have a plan for what you're going to do. Like you should write it down. And I was like, okay. And I honestly don't remember why I didn't do that. I don't, you just get busy with all the other things, and I was, my curriculum and all this stuff, but I never did that. And I just like, started this year and these things started happening and I did not know what to do. I knew what I didn't wanna do, but I didn't know what I was gonna do instead, and so I just kind of, like, gave them the eye and, like, hoped that was enough, and just I ended up letting a lot go. Some teachers end up letting stuff go when they don't have a plan, others are just wildly inconsistent. So you have to I don't know which camp you guys might fall into, but you might find yourself going, "Man, I don't let everything go, I come down hard." But you might be coming down hard one day, letting it go the next day, in the middle, like, you're just all over and it just kinda depends on your mood, right? So in either case, whether we're letting things go or whether we are just wildly inconsistent, that does not set the right tone for our students, right? They are seeing either this teacher is super inconsistent, I don't know what to expect, or they're just seeing I'm just getting away with stuff. So they just, in either case, they keep pushing. And they can also sense that we don't know what we're going to do. And they can sense that uncertainty and it also causes them to pounce. I don't care if they're in kindergarten. They have these radars. They just know. And they sense it and they push the line further and further and further and further and further. And it really we can end up in a disaster very quickly. So yeah, October called into the principal's office, all these things are happening behind your back. You got to get it together, go in the car, cry, all of that, right? So that's what happens when you don't have a plan. So it's really, really important to actually think through how am I going to handle various situations?
Yeah, and you asked, the question of like, I don't know why I didn't do it. I would imagine part of that is we don't realize A, how important it is, and B, even like what should I put on it? We think like, okay, like for me, I really knew I need to have procedures and I need to have like a system for what I expect and what I want them to do. But I didn't have a plan for what if they don't do it? Because I was a kid who did it. Like, I just did what they asked. So it didn't even occur to me that they wouldn't, which is stupid, but like that's what I thought. Like I didn't consider it. And so I think we just don't know what we don't know. And so really having a structure from somebody else. I mean, at Teach for the Heart, we have Classroom Management 101 is a great spot to do it. And then over the summer, we offer your Smooth Running class, which is a 4-week class where you go through every single piece and like with other teachers, and which I think is a really powerful piece too. But just having a plan with all the pieces laid out is so important because we're gonna we're gonna lean into the things that we're naturally good at, but we really have to put the effort also into those other pieces that are like, I'm not so good at that." Because if we don't address it in writing out a plan or figuring out, at least spending some time thinking about it, we get into the school year and that's where you said they recognize it and they will just like dig their little fingers in and find it. So that you don't want that to be your downfall is that you just didn't think about it.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think sometimes we just yeah, it just doesn't happen for one reason or another because we sit down and we're like, "I'm kinda blank." So you know, hopefully it'll just solve itself, which it
Yes.
doesn't. So that Jen mentioned your smooth running class. So if you are saying, "Oh yeah, I need this and I don't know how to do it," your smooth running class is a program starting actually here. I think within the next week, depending on when you're listening to this. And we are going to go through it with you. We have templates with copy and paste idea banks. So you are making a personalized plan. It's important you don't just copy someone else's plan because you won't really agree. Like you are yourself and you need it to align with what you think is best. But we have I like basically copy and paste idea banks so you can see 3 or 4 options and just pick and tweak the one that works for you. So we'll walk you through the whole process in your smooth running class. If you go to teachfortheheart.com/smooth, you can get all the details and sign up. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation, and they want to let you know that applications are now open for the 2026 Faith and Nation Student Forum. Each fall, the Herzog Foundation hosts an incredible 4-day retreat for outstanding high school seniors from Christian schools and homeschool co-ops. The Faith and Nation Student Forum gives students the opportunity to strengthen their Christian worldview and engage with government leaders. Students can also participate in teen challenges, outdoor adventures, and social events designed to build leadership skills and lasting friendships. The Herzog Foundation covers the cost of the retreat, all except travel, making this an amazing opportunity for your high school seniors. Help them apply. Applications close September 18th. Learn more and apply at herzogfoundation.com. Now, back to our program. So having a classroom management plan is so important so that when students cross the line, you know what to do and you can address it. And if you start that on day one, it sets the tone right away. Number 3, though, this is also something you want to start on day one. Clearly teach both your procedures and your expectations. So it's really important that you think through ahead of time. Jen, you were talking about this. What are my procedures? How am I going to handle just the various, practical elements of the classroom? And then also, what are my expectations? And then you have to clearly teach them to your students. And we've talked about this before. Maybe I can find and link an episode in the notes where we talk about the steps to teaching procedures. We recommend a 4-step process that I don't have time to go into in detail, but you explain it, then you practice it right then and there. You correct anything that went wrong, and you redo it if needed. That's really powerful because it really cements in students' minds that okay, I actually need to do this. And then expectations too, though. So one of the things, though, for expectations that I found as well is that a lot of times we actually haven't clarified our expectations. We just are like, "Oh, yeah, we think we know what we expect," right? Like, "Oh, yeah, good behavior." But then something happens and we're, like, caught off guard, is that okay?" Just a simple example, I remember seeing a kid put their head down on their desk and thinking, am I gonna allow that or not?" And I'm trying to decide this in the middle of teaching, equations. And so that's not the time to decide that. We wanna think through that stuff ahead of time. And even something as simple as talking, most teachers don't actually want 0 talking ever. It's like, "Well, I want it now, but not this time." So you really have to think through that and crystallize it because there's no way to communicate it. There's no way to hold the line if you don't know where the line is. So that's actually part of in your smooth running class when we create the plan. The first step is actually clarifying the expectations. So we got to get clear on those. And then when we start the school year, we have to very clearly teach them to our students. Mhm.
And I think building out and adding to those expectations as you go through, it is the first part of the plan, but as you get to the procedures or you get to the follow-up pieces, you realize, "Oh yeah, I really do this is an underlying expectation that I have, so I need to go back and I need to list it out." Um, and just that I think that's an important recognition too, that our classroom management plans are always evolving. So
Mhm.
we may have a certain expectation one year, and then the next year's student, group, you're like, okay, well, I need to tweak a little bit. They can handle more, so I can give them more. My expectation can be higher, or in the reverse.
Yeah.
Just I need to address things differently this year because of where they're at.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So thinking it through, adjusting as needed to your group, and then clearly teaching your procedures and your expectations during those first few days or weeks, depending on, you can't get everything in on day one. But teaching that over the course of that and making sure you're really keeping it clear. And then number 4, then you need to insist that the expectations and procedures are followed. And when they're not, respond consistently. And this is the part that can be hard. But it's not complicated though, right? Especially if we've made a plan. That's the key. Responding consistently is incredibly difficult if you haven't thought about it because you're in the moment, you're just like, I don't know what to do. But if you've thought about it ahead of time, you know what you're going to do when students cross the line. Now, all you have to do is be as consistent as you can. You're never going to be perfect, but you just try to follow your plan as closely as possible. And once again, if you start with that from the first moment the students walk in your class, or at least, once very quickly right on there, that is going to set a tone and it's going to keep so many issues from happening in the first place because students are going to pick up, oh, she knows what she's doing. Oh, she's not letting little things go. So I'm not going to try, steps 2, 3, 4, 6. And it's going to make such a big difference.
Yeah, and I think this partly goes back to how well did I teach the procedure? Because sometimes what as I didn't think of this before, but as you were talking, I realized there was one time I had this review game for our students, and it was random kids got picked to answer a problem and they had to come up on the board. But I hadn't specifically said and taught the procedure for how to answer it, who had, whose work did it have to be like, I mean, you have to get kind of granular when you're teaching expectations and procedures. And my students found a loophole and I was so upset and mad and I was just like, "Ah, you're undermining the whole thing." But really it was on me. I hadn't thought through what are all the steps and what are and topping that so that then I mean, they weren't doing anything wrong. They were just trying to win the game. that that sometimes it is us in the way that we taught it. We need to okay, we take ownership and say, "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I needed to do this. So let's go through it again." And you just reteach the procedure again. Sometimes it is, "Oh no, it's I taught it fine. You just need to do it." Like now I need to give the consequence. And I'll be honest, that was not where I was good at because I was always questioning in my head, like, "Oh, is that okay? I said it wasn't okay, but in this case, is it okay?" And so just, I needed to be more firm. But do you have any like tips on in that moment, like any fallbacks or like if you haven't thought through this is how I want to handle this, what do we do?
Yeah, so when we make a plan, we actually create a default response for something we haven't thought of yet. So we do kind of have something you can say. For me, it was, see me after class, or I'm going to have to do something about that, or I'm going to come talk to you later. If it's just like, oh my goodness, I don't know. Because yeah, there's always, no matter how well you plan, there's always going to be something that pops up that you're like, nope, didn't put. What if they put a kid in the trash can on my list of possibilities? I mean, it's just you just don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, I think the more you think through ahead of time, though, the more confident you are, and the more situations you do have. So that's why when we do your smooth running class or classroom management 101, it's pretty detailed. We think through a lot of different areas and flesh out a lot of things. And then I think in the moment, I mean, I don't know. I've told this story before. The first time I had to give a kid a detention, I literally like had to call up my husband to try to like I don't know what I wanted him to do, but it's like I needed a pep talk to like get the courage to like give this kid a detention. I was just not my thing. I still struggle with it. But it's kind of that I think that's another powerful thing about making the plan is like you're predetermining this is what I'm gonna do, like, and pre-deciding and choosing something that you feel like, "No, this is what I should do. This is right and fair, and I agree with it, and I'm aligned with it." And so then and, like, kinda deciding, "I'm just gonna do it." So that in the moment, the decision is already made, now I just have to do it. And final piece of advice, you won't always be consistent as much as you try. And I've seen teachers fall into this thing of like, well, I didn't correct so and so, so now I can't correct so and so, and now I can, and just think for a minute, like that doesn't work. You will never correct anyone again. So if you miss one, just get the next one. Like you just get right back on. Missing one is not the end of the world as long as you're mostly consistent. So those are our four things that we may think will make a huge difference. If you believe it's possible, create a classroom management plan, clearly teach your procedures and expectations, and then insist that they're followed. You are sending all the right signals to your students. Now, we're running out of time, but real quick, I want to give just a kind of caveat and some other pieces that are also important. Okay. So, these are a couple other things where if these are missing, you're going to have problems. So, one is just we have to love our students, we have to build relationships with them. If they don't know that you care, it's not gonna go well. They might maybe they would be afraid of you, but you're gonna miss out on those opportunities to really make a difference. So you have to love them, you have to build relationships. I think that's assumed, but I don't wanna assume that. So I wanted to say that. And then there's another piece too that can really undermine what we're doing, and that is you need to actually be good at teaching your subject. And that's a little bit hard to say because, it's like a hard truth, but you need to, like, honestly look at yourself and say, "Do are my students perpetually confused or perpetually bored?" And I'm there's always gonna be a couple students that are confused any given day, but if it's like a lot of my class is confused a lot of the time, or a lot of my class is really bored a lot of the time, they're going to really struggle to learn, and they're going to struggle to behave. And, you know, the best classroom management structures will help, but only so much. So that's like an underlying issue that you might need to look at. So I do encourage you to give yourself an honest look if that's part of the issue. If it's like, yeah, I might not actually be that doing that good of a job of actually teaching my subject. And if so, that's like a whole nother thing, but it's something you can address. It's something you can get help with. Go to your administrator, go to your fellow teachers, instructional coach, and say, hey, I'm recognizing this. Like, can you point me in the right direction? That is really worth investing in. As not instead of these other things, you need these other things too, but that's a really key piece as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really important too. A lot of teachers, especially at Christian schools, are coming out of the workplace and into teaching. And so, you may be really good at engineering, but the explaining of math in the classroom may be harder. And it's a totally different skill set. And it's okay to say, I just need to grow in this skill because that's all it is. It's a skill that you practice and you learn. And if you've made it to be an engineer or you've made it out in the workplace, like you can do it. You've proved I am smart enough to do these things so I can grow in this other skill.
Yeah. Yeah. So encourage you to reach out, ask for help, view it as a skill, and just continue to learn and grow. So, real quick, let's review our four things: believe it's possible, have a classroom management plan, clearly teach your procedures and expectations, and then insist they're followed and respond consistently when they're not. If you're saying, I need help, once again, we want to invite you to your smooth running class 4-week program where there's just videos drop each week along with the plans and templates. Everything is designed for you, but you will walk out of there with all your expectations clarified. You will think through your procedures. You'll think about, positive reinforcement consequences, and then you will have a written plan for how am I going to address all of the common classroom issues. So you will be confident, you will be ready to be consistent, and kind of know how to start that school year right. So if you're interested in joining us, go to teachfortheheart.com/smooth. It starts July 6th. So coming up here very, very quickly. Jen, any final thoughts you want to share as we wrap up?
Well, I guess I would just share, a little follow up to what I started at the beginning that, maybe you're not in your first year, or maybe you're not just going into teaching that you need this classroom management plan. Maybe you've been teaching for 13 or 20 years, but you've never done it and written it out. I mean, we have lots and lots of stories from teachers over the years who have taken your smooth learning class or have gone through classroom management 101. And they say, I can't believe how much this helped me as a veteran teacher. So if you're feeling like you need or just want the space to list out those details, but you've been teaching for a long time, you're going to be in good company. You're not going to be alone. And it's still a good time to do it, even if you're not in your first years.
Yes. Yeah, and you might have been feeling like, "Man, this was easy and it's been getting harder in recent years just with how students' behaviors are different," and that's a great time to say, "Okay, I'm just gonna step back," like you said, take some time and really just shore up this area so that you're bringing all these skills, it's gonna make it easier, and I think you'll emerge really, really confident and ready to go. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. It's been brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. All views and opinions are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of the Herzog Foundation. We look forward to speaking with you again soon. In the meantime, teacher, remember, God is at work in you and through you, and He's using you to make a difference. Keep your eyes on Him and teach for the heart.